I'm Angela Sawsville, the Executive Director at Flourish Counseling and Coaching in Denver. And welcome to our video series, Relationships That Not Only Last, but Thrive. So this series is designed to give you the Cliff Notes version of all of the proven relationship strategies and tools that will help you and your partner not only learn how to work out your differences and be able to successfully stay together, but also to be able to take your relationship to a deeper, easier, more fulfilling level. I've got a master's degree in couples and family therapy, a license, and a lot of training in relationship tools and strategies. And for the past 13 years or more, I have been given countless opportunities to sit down with couples and to get a real intimate glimpse into their relationships, to identify really common pitfalls and really common ways that couples are able to make things work. I want you to know that all of the insights that I'm going to be sharing with you in this series are what we call evidence-based, meaning that they have been researched and tested by some of the most prominent psychologists in the field, and they've been proven to be effective in the majority of couples that use them. Now, I share that with you because I am keenly aware of the stereotypes about therapists that are out there. We oftentimes tend to think of therapists as these kind of airy-fairy people who like to ask the question, and how does that make you feel? And really only want to talk about feelings. And that's fine, I totally get it. I actually really do enjoy talking to people about their feelings. But what I love even more is teaching couples how to use scientific, proven strategies about the science of relationships and the science of attachment so that they can get the results that they want. So, let's begin at the beginning. Opposites really do attract. I'm sure there are a number of things that you and your partner have in common with one another, maybe similar values and similar life goals. However, on an unconscious level, we all tend to partner up with people who have a different relationship style than our own relationship style. We're going to talk about relationship styles in more detail further on in this series, but I mention it now because statistically speaking, there's a very high likelihood that you have fallen in love with somebody who is wired very differently than you are, who takes life at a very different pace than you do, and who handles the problems in your relationship very differently than how you handle them. So when a relationship isn't doing so well, what couples tend to notice first is that it feels to them like communication has broken down. They don't feel like they're truly understanding one another, and they're often feeling tremendously frustrated or angry about that. And oftentimes they're feeling pretty scared that maybe they won't be able to work things out and that maybe they won't be able to get the relationship unstuck. So as communication begins to break down and we're having a real difficult time understanding that person who is wired so differently than we are, emotions are also getting really big and strong. And whether you are aware of your emotions or not, they are present in the room with you and your partner when you're not getting along, and they're having a big impact on the situation. So, I lost my notes. When a couple isn't doing so well, they find that they are getting stuck in what we call a negative cycle, which means the dance that they do with one another last month when they were arguing about the in-laws is essentially the same dance that they did with each other this Tuesday when they were arguing about money. Now that cycle, it looks different in every relationship. But one very common example that we see pretty often, for example, might be that a husband makes some plans and the wife doesn't feel as though he took her feelings into consideration when he made those plans, and he made them without consulting her. And so she may say something angry or critical about it, and he might feel completely ambushed. What? She's upset about this and she's upset again? And he might respond rather defensively with her. That's one common example of what one of those negative cycles might look like. And so that dance tends to get repeated regardless of what the issue is that particular week. So these cycles come up when we have an emotional need, something that we need our partner to fulfill for us, and that need is not getting met. Sometimes we're able to identify what that need is and tell them, hey, I really don't feel respected when you don't consult me first. Sometimes it feels like they don't get it or they don't understand it. And then in a lot of other situations, it all feels a bit too foggy and muddled inside of our heads that we can't even clearly articulate what it is we're needing for ourselves, let alone for our partners. It is normal and universal to have some emotional needs from our partners. And most couples know what the basic emotional needs are. Hey, my partner needs me to be committed. Hey, my partner needs me to be faithful to them and trustworthy. And yet there are usually some additional core needs that go beyond just the basics, that go beyond just the common sense ones. And those emotional needs, they're undeniable. If we're going to be our happiest in our relationship, if we're going to feel as close and connected to our partner as possible, then those needs have to be met. Now, we can suck it up for quite a long time without having those needs met, but there's usually some negative consequence to them not being met. There's usually some kind of emotional gick that goes with it when they're not being met. Here's the interesting part. Those emotional needs usually aren't present in the relationship during the early infatuation stages. But once they come up, they don't tend to go away until we take care of them. So couples often kind of are confused and surprised that these things are coming up when they're already years into the relationship and these issues weren't a huge problem in the past. So if our partner does something that fails to meet our emotional need, it may feel as though they have brushed up against this old wound that we have. Maybe I wasn't even aware that that spot was still tender, and yet now that they've rubbed up against it, it feels really awful, and I react very strongly as a result. So here's what I want you to know. Having a relationship get stuck in a negative cycle is really very normal. It's a normal developmental process that occurs in a long-term committed relationship. And even the most loving and committed relationships will get stuck in these negative interaction cycles. They're often really brought up when the couple is enduring a lot of stress. The early years of parenthood are very common for bringing these negative cycles up in couples because they're stretched so thin trying to meet the needs of the little ones that there's a lot of stress there. But additional career stressors and financial strains can also really bring these negative cycles up. And couples who've gone through some really painful losses and other painful experiences will often really notice these negative cycles flare up after they've been through those heartbreaking circumstances as well. So it is pretty normal to have a negative cycle going on in your relationship. And that's important because once we know that something is normal and common, there is a tremendous amount of hope for staying in a relationship and improving a relationship that we can harvest out of that fact that this is a normal process. I remember very vividly the evening that I was in graduate school learning how to be a therapist when I first learned about these negative cycles in relationships. And my marriage to my husband was really struggling at the time. And I remember a huge relief, this wave of relief washing over my body as I'm sitting in class learning about negative cycles, because my husband and I were stuck in a negative cycle at that point in time. And once I learned that that was a normal and common experience inside of a relationship, I knew that it meant that my marriage was not necessarily flawed or doomed to end. And so when we know that a lot of couples have already worked their way out of a negative interaction cycle, it also means we can access all of the tools and strategies that they used to help themselves, and we can apply it to our own relationships. So there's definitely a lot of hope there. And when couples end their negative cycles with one another, it involves both of them working very diligently to learn how to meet one another's emotional needs so that they're creating win-win scenarios inside of their relationship. It's not about one partner sacrificing their needs to meet the others. No. It's about both of them getting their needs met simultaneously, creating win-win strategies inside of the relationship. And as a result, those couples experience a much deeper level of connection and harmony with one another. And you can usually tell those couples apart from the others because there's a very lighthearted chemistry between them. So as you're creating hope for your relationship, I would also encourage you to be realistic as well. Our clients are some of the smartest, most motivated folks that you will ever meet. And yet they have recognized that their negative cycles are too complex for them to be able to find their way out of it without hiring a professional guide. If these cycles were easier and more manageable, we would just resolve them at home on our own, and we wouldn't need to hire professionals to assist us. Chances are, if you were hanging out watching a video made by a couples therapist, you might have some stuff going on in your own relationship. You might be feeling a little bit stuck as well. And so where in our society can we turn to learn about the strategies that really make relationships thrive? Well, the environment of therapy, couples therapy, is really one of very few settings where you can get personalized feedback on your unique relationship dynamics and on your specific needs and your partner's specific needs. Now, there are a lot of relationships out there that will not work out. They will fail entirely. And sometimes that is due in part to the fact that one partner refuses to ever step foot inside a couples therapy session. There is still a stigma that exists to some degree in our society about accessing support. And that stigma tends to be higher for men than it is for women. But one of the analogies that I would offer you is that when we're working in a business environment in corporate America, it's really quite commonplace and considered a beneficial strategy to hire an external consultant, to have them come into the business and to complete a SWOT analysis to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of that unique business, and to help the organization create an action plan to minimize the weaknesses and threats and to maximize and build upon the organization's strengths. That is very similar to the process that takes place inside of couples therapy, and marriages benefit from that kind of external consultation just as businesses do. So, food for thought. Now, participating in therapy is not inexpensive. Let's just put that right out there right now. But one of the most exciting things about working with couples is that once they have identified how to meet one another's emotional needs, those things don't really change over the course of their years together. I can honestly tell you that what I needed from my husband emotionally when our first kiddo was in diapers is the same thing that I need from him now that she's in high school. And so when you and your partner are investing in learning these deep insights into one another, they really do become a compass, and they really do guide you and remain relevant for years to come. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.